The holographic display flickered in the command center of the Xeraxian flagship Eternal Dawn as Admiral Krivax studied the footage from their long-range probes. The images showed Earth's outer colonies, modest settlements scattered across several systems, protected by what appeared to be rudimentary defense systems. His secondary eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of dismissal among his species. "These humans," he rumbled, his crystalline voice echoing through the chamber, "they've barely mastered interstellar travel, yet they dare to expand into our sector." The bridge crew maintained their positions, their iridescent scales shifting colors in response to their commander's words. Commander Nixis, his second-in-command, stepped forward. Her battle-scarred armor reflected the soft blue light of the tactical displays. "Our intelligence suggests they're still reliant on chemical propulsion for most of their vessels. Their weapons are primarily kinetic and nuclear, primitive by our standards." The Xeraxian Empire had dominated their portion of the galaxy for millennia. Their ships, powered by quantum cascade drives and protected by gravitic shields, represented the peak of technological achievement. The sight of human colonies, with their simple dome structures and visible power generators, seemed almost offensive to their sensibilities. "They're spreading like bacterial growth," Krivax observed, manipulating the holographic display to show the pattern of human expansion. 6 new colonies in the past solar cycle alone. If left unchecked, they'll be at our core worlds within a decade. The tactical officer, Lieutenant Vex, pulled up additional data streams. Their largest colony in our sector, New Providence, houses approximately 50,000 humans. Defensive capabilities appear minimal: orbital satellites, ground-based laser arrays, and a small fleet of patrol vessels. Krivax's primary eyes narrowed as he processed this information. The Xeraxian Empire had encountered many species during its expansion, but few had shown such aggressive colonization patterns while maintaining such primitive technology. It was almost paradoxical. "Send a probe closer to New Providence," he ordered. "I want detailed scans of their defensive grid." The probe's data painted an even more underwhelming picture. The colony's defenses were visible, obvious, almost carelessly so. Satellite networks with clear power signatures, weapon emplacements that made no attempt at concealment, and patrol routes that seemed predictable and inefficient. "They're not even trying to hide their vulnerabilities," Nixis noted, her tone carrying a hint of confusion. "Either they're supremely confident or they're supremely foolish," Krivax finished. "Prepare the battle fleet. We'll start with New Providence, a swift strike to demonstrate our power. These humans need to learn their place in the galaxy." As the command was relayed through the fleet, thousands of Xeraxian warriors began their battle preparations. Their ships, sleek crystalline structures that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, moved into attack formation. The Empire had perfected the art of planetary subjugation over countless conquests. The intelligence officer, Zix, approached with a final report. "Admiral, we've intercepted their communications. They seem to be discussing agricultural yields and water reclamation projects. No indication they've detected our presence." Krivax felt a familiar sensation of superiority wash over him. How many civilizations had the Empire encountered that believed their simple technologies could protect them? How many had learned too late the price of standing against the Xeraxian Empire? "Launch the first wave," he commanded. "Target their orbital infrastructure first, then their ground-based defenses. I want this operation completed within one planetary rotation. Show them the futility of resistance." As the fleet accelerated toward New Providence, none of the Xeraxian commanders noticed the subtle changes in the colony's power signatures. None of them questioned why the humans' communications remained so mundane even as their ships approached. And none of them wondered why a species capable of crossing the vast distances between stars would leave their colonies so apparently vulnerable. The first wave of Xeraxian fighters streaked toward New Providence's orbit, their weapons charged and ready to deliver a devastating lesson in humility. Admiral Krivax watched from his command chair, already composing in his mind the terms of surrender he would impose on these presumptuous humans. The lesson about to be taught, however, would not be the one he anticipated. The first sign that something was wrong came when the Zeraxian vanguard entered New Providence's orbit. The colony below lay silent, its streets empty, its buildings dark. No emergency broadcasts, no panic, no desperate pleas for mercy, just an unsettling quiet that seemed to mock the invasion force's dramatic arrival. Lieutenant Vex's scales shifted to a troubled shade of green as he analyzed the sensor readings. "Admiral, I'm detecting no life signs in the colony. The infrastructure appears intact, but it's completely deserted." Admiral Krivax rose from his command chair, all four of his eyes fixed on the holographic display of the silent colony below. "Impossible. 50,000 humans don't simply vanish. Scan deeper." The Zeraxian sensors probed the colony's structures, searching for hidden bunkers or underground facilities. They found nothing but empty buildings and powered-down equipment. Yet everything was in perfect order, no signs of panic or hasty evacuation, no abandoned personal belongings. It was as if the entire population had simply walked away, taking everything of importance with them. "Admiral," Commander Nixis called out, her voice tense. "The other colonies in this sector, they're reporting the same condition. All evacuated. All empty." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans had known they were coming. Not only had they known, but they had executed a coordinated evacuation of multiple colonies without being detected. The same humans who supposedly relied on primitive technology had completely evaded the Empire's surveillance network. "Launch ground teams," Krivax ordered, his crystalline voice carrying an edge of anger. "I want every structure searched, every database accessed. Find out where they went and how they knew." Zeraxian drop ships descended through the atmosphere, their troops deploying in perfect formation across the abandoned colony. The soldiers moved through empty streets, their advanced weapons raised against an enemy that wasn't there. The only sound was the whisper of the wind through the deserted buildings. Captain Rixis, leading the ground forces, reported from the colony's central administration building. "Admiral, we've accessed their computer systems. They're still operational, but something's not right. The data appears to be deliberately left behind. Technical manuals, cultural archives, basic colonial records, nothing of strategic value." Krivax's mandibles clicked in frustration. "They're playing with us. No species this primitive could orchestrate such a precise withdrawal. Check for hidden weapons, explosive devices, anything that could." His words were cut off by a sudden alert from the fleet sensor array. A faint energy signature had appeared at the edge of the system, barely detectable but undeniably present. As the Zeraxian ships turned their sensors toward it, another appeared, then another, blinking into existence like stars emerging at dusk. Energy signatures matched no known configuration, Lieutenant Vex reported, his scales now pulsing with anxiety. They're appearing throughout the system. Hundreds of them." Commander Nixis leaned over the sensor display, her armor reflecting the increasingly crowded tactical hologram. "These readings, they're not ships, at least not any design we've encountered. They're like nodes of some kind." The mysterious energy signatures continued to multiply, forming an intricate web throughout the star system. The Zeraxian fleet, positioned around the abandoned colony, now found itself surrounded by a network of unknown devices that seemed to have materialized from nowhere. "Pull the ground forces back," Krivax commanded, his instincts screaming that something was terribly wrong. "Prepare the fleet for immediate." The first node activated before he could finish the order. A pulse of energy rippled through space, followed by another, and another, each node in the network lighting up in sequence. The pulses seemed to bend the fabric of space itself, creating a lattice of intersecting energy fields that surrounded the Zeraxian fleet. "Admiral." Vex's voice carried a note of panic now. "Our quantum cascade drives are not responding. The energy field, it's disrupting our propulsion systems." The mighty Zeraxian fleet, pride of an empire that had dominated the galaxy for millennia, found itself trapped in a web of forces they didn't understand, surrounded by technology they had dismissed as impossible from a species they had gravely underestimated. In the silence that followed, a transmission cut through the Xeraxian command frequencies. The voice that spoke was calm, almost cordial, but carried an underlying steel that sent chills through even the most hardened warriors on the bridge. "This is Admiral James Harrison of the United Earth Defense Force," the voice announced. "We apologize for the deception, but we needed you to commit your forces fully before we revealed ourselves. Your ships are now contained within our quantum inhibition field. Please stand by for our terms of engagement." Admiral Krivax, standing rigid in his command center, realized with growing horror that the trap had been laid long before his fleet arrived. The humans hadn't fled in fear, they had withdrawn with purpose, leaving behind a carefully crafted illusion of vulnerability that the Xeraxians had eagerly believed. And now, as new energy signatures began to emerge from behind New Providence's moons and asteroid belts, the true extent of humanity's technological capabilities was about to become terrifyingly clear. The void around New Providence erupted with activity as hundreds of human vessels emerged from their hiding places. Unlike the crude ships the Xeraxians had expected, these were sleek predators of space, their hulls covered in light-absorbing materials that had rendered them invisible to standard scans. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of propulsion systems far beyond simple chemical rockets. "Impossible," Commander Nixis whispered, watching the tactical display as more ships appeared. "Their technology, this isn't primitive. This isn't even contemporary. Some of these capabilities exceed our own." Admiral Krivax gripped the arms of his command chair, his scales shifting through shades of rage and disbelief. The human ships were taking up strategic positions around his trapped fleet, their movements precise and coordinated. What had seemed like a simple punitive expedition was rapidly becoming a nightmare. "Sir," Lieutenant Vex called out, his voice strained, "I'm detecting energy signatures from the surface of New Providence. The buildings, they're changing." Below, the seemingly abandoned colony was transforming. Buildings that had appeared to be simple habitation domes were unfurling like metallic flowers, revealing sophisticated weapon systems and sensor arrays. The entire colony had been a facade, a carefully constructed stage for this moment. "This is Admiral Harrison again," the human voice returned, carrying the same unnervingly calm tone. "I trust you're beginning to understand your situation. Those quantum inhibition fields aren't just blocking your drives, they're also preventing any quantum communications with your empire. You are, effectively, alone." Krivax's secondary eyes narrowed as he assessed his options. His fleet was substantial, over 300 ships of various classes, all equipped with the finest weapons in the empire. Even trapped, they could put up a significant fight. "You think you can challenge the might of the Xeraxian Empire?" Krivax responded, his voice carrying the weight of millennia of military superiority. "We have conquered species far more advanced than what you thought we were." Harrison interrupted. "That was rather the point, Admiral. We've been studying your empire for years. Your patterns of conquest, your technological capabilities, your tactical doctrines. While you saw what you expected to see, primitive humans fumbling their way into space, we were learning everything about you." As if to emphasize the point, several human vessels suddenly shifted position, their movements accompanied by spatial distortions that shouldn't have been possible according to any Xeraxian understanding of physics. They weren't using quantum cascade drives or any known form of propulsion, they were manipulating space itself in ways the Empire's scientists had only theorized about. "The colonies," Nixis said suddenly, understanding dawning in her voice. "The rapid expansion, the obvious defenses, the predictable patrol routes, it was all bait. We didn't find them, they wanted us to come." Indeed, Harrison confirmed, having heard her realization. Each colony was a carefully laid trap, designed to draw your attention and appeal to your sense of superiority. "We needed you to believe we were an easy target. The tactical display suddenly lit up with new warnings as the transformed buildings of New Providence began emitting complex energy fields that interwove with the quantum inhibition network. The Zeraxian fleet's shields flickered as unknown frequencies probed their defenses. Your empire has a history of absorbing or destroying species you consider inferior, Harrison continued. We decided to use that against you. But now you have a choice, Admiral Krivax. You can either power down your weapons and accept our terms, or... The threat was left hanging, but at that moment, several smaller human vessels demonstrated exactly what those terms meant. They launched what appeared to be simple projectiles toward a group of Zeraxian frigates. The Empire's shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and kinetic impacts, suddenly found themselves trying to stop objects that seemed to exist in multiple spatial phases simultaneously. 3 Zeraxian ships vanished instantly, not destroyed but simply removed from space, their quantum signatures scattered across multiple dimensions. That's impossible, Vex breathed, his scales now pale with fear. Our understanding of physics is incomplete, Harrison finished. We've had centuries of being underestimated by various alien powers to work on solutions to problems you haven't even conceived of yet. This is merely one of them. Around the fleet, more human ships were moving into attack positions, their weapons systems charging with energies that defied Zeraxian sensors' attempts to classify them. The transformed colony below now bristled with defenses that made its previous appearance seem like a child's drawing compared to a master's painting. Admiral Krivax, for the first time in his long military career, felt something he had never expected to experience, the cold, creeping certainty that he was completely outmatched. The humans hadn't just prepared for this confrontation, they had orchestrated every aspect of it, using the Empire's own prejudices as a weapon against them. And as the human vessels continued their inexorable approach, their impossible technologies humming with barely restrained power, Krivax realized that his choice wasn't really a choice at all. The humans had never intended for this to be a battle. It was a demonstration. Admiral Krivax stood motionless on his bridge, watching as more of his fleet systems fell under human control. Their quantum shields, once thought impenetrable, were being systematically disabled by precise pulses from the surrounding network of human devices. The mighty Zeraxian warships, pride of an empire that spanned centuries, hung powerless in space like insects caught in amber. Your empire's tendency to underestimate lesser species has been its greatest weakness, Admiral Harrison's voice continued, now tinged with something that might have been pity. Did you never wonder why you found so few advanced civilizations in your expansion? Why most species you encountered seemed primitive by your standards? A holographic representation of Harrison appeared on the Zeraxian bridge, a courtesy, Krivax realized, that they hadn't extended to the humans during their own communications. The human admiral appeared as a tall, silver-haired figure wearing a simple dark uniform devoid of the ornate decorations that Zeraxian officers favored. We weren't the first to use this strategy, Harrison explained, his hologram walking casually around the bridge as if he were physically present. We found the records, you see. Hidden in subspace frequencies your sensors never thought to check. Messages from other species, warnings about the Empire, suggestions for survival. Commander Nixus's scales flickered with realization. The Centauri Convergence, she said. The Arcturus Alliance. The Proxima Collective. They all seemed so primitive when we found them, yet their colonies were always empty when we arrived. Very good, Commander, Harrison nodded. They're all thriving now, hidden behind veils of technological camouflage that your empire's arrogance never allowed you to see. We learned from their examples, refined their techniques, and waited for you to take the bait. Around the Zeraxian fleet, the human ships were now close enough to be seen through the bridge's visual ports. Their designs were elegant yet functional, incorporating technologies that seemed to bend reality itself. What had appeared to be simple hull plating shifted and flowed like liquid metal, adapting to space conditions in real time. Sir, Lieutenant Vex reported, his voice hollow, I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching through subspace. They They matched the profiles of the species we thought we'd driven to hiding. All of them. The space around New Providence lit up as ships of various designs emerged from subspace corridors that shouldn't have existed. The Centauri vessels glowed with internal energies that defied physics. Arcturus ships phased in and out of normal space like ghostly predators. The Proxima fleet arrived in formations that spoke of tactical sophistication far beyond anything the Empire had achieved. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Coalition," Harrison announced, spreading his arms to encompass the gathered fleets. An alliance of species united by a common experience, surviving the Zeraxian Empire's attention by appearing too primitive to be worth conquering thoroughly. Krivax's primary eyes narrowed as he processed the magnitude of the deception. "How long?" he demanded. "How long have you all been watching us, manipulating us?" "Long enough to understand that the Empire would never change its ways without a dramatic demonstration of its vulnerabilities," Harrison replied. "Each species you encountered chose to hide rather than confront you directly. Humanity, we decided to take a different approach." The tactical display was now a symphony of advanced technologies that the Empire's sensors could barely comprehend. The combined fleets of the coalition had surrounded the Zeraxian ships in a display of power that made their own forces look primitive by comparison. "Your ships are now completely under our control," Harrison continued, his hologram moving to stand directly before Krivax. "Your weapons are disabled, your quantum drives are offline, and your communications are blocked. But this isn't about destruction, Admiral. It's about education." As if to demonstrate this point, several human vessels began projecting complex energy fields that literally rewrote the quantum state of space around selected Zeraxian ships. The affected vessels found their weapons systems not simply disabled, but transformed into something entirely different, technology that would take the Empire's scientists centuries to understand. "The terms are simple," Harrison stated. "The Empire will immediately cease all expansionist activities. You will acknowledge the sovereignty of every species you've encountered, including those you believed you'd subjugated. And you will begin the process of integrating into the galactic community as equals, not conquerors." Commander Nixis stepped forward, her military bearing still intact despite the situation. "And if we refuse?" Harrison's hologram smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Then we demonstrate exactly why humanity chose to be the ones to spring this trap. We didn't hide because we needed to, Admiral Krivax. We hid because we wanted to give you a chance to learn from your mistakes before facing what we're truly capable of." The human ship's weapon systems powered up in unison, not as a threat, but as a reminder. Each weapon represented a different aspect of technology that the Empire had never imagined possible, each capable of ending the confrontation in ways that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of warfare. The choice before Krivax was clear: accept a future where the Zeraxian Empire would have to acknowledge its own limitations, or face extinction at the hands of species they had foolishly dismissed as primitive. The Empire's greatest strength, its absolute certainty in its own superiority, had become the weapon of its own potential destruction. In the tense silence that followed Admiral Harrison's ultimatum, the Zeraxian command bridge became a tableau of shattered pride and dawning understanding. Admiral Krivax, his scales now a muted shade that reflected his inner turmoil, faced a decision that would reshape not just his empire, but the entire galaxy's future. "You never needed the deception," Krivax said finally, his voice carrying the weight of revelation. "Your technology, your allies, you could have confronted us directly from the beginning." Harrison's hologram nodded slowly. "We could have. But that would have only continued the cycle of violence and domination. We chose this path because we wanted to change the way your empire thinks, not just defeat it." Around them, the combined fleet of the Galactic Defense Coalition maintained their positions, their advanced technologies humming with quiet power. Each ship represented a species that had chosen patience and cunning over direct confrontation, wisdom over pride. "Our scientists," Commander Nixis interjected, her analytical mind still processing the implications, "they always said there were anomalies in our sensor data." Unexplained energy signatures, mathematical inconsistencies in our space-time measurements. We dismissed them as instrument errors. Because you couldn't conceive of the possibility that primitive species might be capable of technologies beyond your understanding, Harrison explained. Your empire's greatest blind spot wasn't technological, it was psychological. You saw what you expected to see. Lieutenant Vex, who had been analyzing the coalition's ships with a mix of fear and fascination, suddenly spoke up. The quantum phase torpedoes that removed our frigates, that's why we never found traces of the species we thought we'd eliminated. They weren't destroyed. They were relocated. Rescued, Harrison corrected. Each species you conquered was evacuated to safe harbors beyond your detection capabilities. We've been building something far greater than Empire, Admiral Krivax. We've been building a community. As if to emphasize this point, representatives from various coalition species began appearing as holograms alongside Harrison. The Centauri delegate's energy form pulsed with colors beyond normal perception. The Arcturus representative shifted between different quantum states as they spoke. The Proxima envoy existed simultaneously in multiple dimensional planes. Your empire stands at a crossroads, the Centauri delegate announced, their voice a harmony of frequencies. You can join us in building something greater than conquest, or you can fade into history as another failed experiment in dominion. The Arcturus representative phased forward. We offer knowledge freely given, not taken. Technologies shared, not hoarded. A future built on cooperation, not subjugation. The choice must be yours, the Proxima envoy added, their multidimensional presence emphasizing the gravity of the moment. But know that the galaxy will no longer tolerate the old ways. Admiral Krivax looked around his bridge, at the officers who had served the Empire's doctrine of superiority without question. He saw in their expressions the same realization that had struck him. Their entire civilization had been operating under a grand delusion. If we agree, Krivax said carefully, what assurance do we have that this coalition won't simply become another empire, using its superior technology to dominate others? Harrison smiled, but this time it reached his eyes. Because we understand what your empire forgot, true advancement isn't measured by technological superiority or military might. It's measured by how we treat those we believe to be less advanced than ourselves. The human admiral gestured, and the coalition ships began transmitting data to the Zeraxian fleet. Not weapon specifications or military intelligence, but cultural information, scientific theories, philosophical treatises, the foundations of understanding needed to build a truly advanced civilization. This is our first gift, Harrison explained. Knowledge freely given, with no demands except that you use it wisely. Your empire can become something greater than a conqueror. You can become teachers, explorers, partners in the greatest adventure any species can undertake, the journey toward genuine wisdom. Krivax stood from his command chair, his bearing still proud but now tempered with humility. And if we choose this path, what becomes of the empire? It evolves, Harrison replied simply. Your territory remains yours, but your borders become gateways rather than barriers. Your fleet becomes part of a collective peacekeeping force rather than an instrument of conquest. Your people learn to look at the stars and see potential friends rather than future subjects. The Zeraxian admiral moved to stand before the assembled holograms, his decision made. In this moment, he understood that the true power of humanity and their allies wasn't in their superior technology or clever strategies. It was in their ability to offer redemption even to those who had sought to destroy them. In the name of the Zeraxian Empire, Krivax announced, his voice carrying the weight of history, I accept these terms. Not in surrender, but in recognition that we have much to learn about what it truly means to be an advanced civilization. As the coalition representatives nodded in approval, Admiral Harrison's hologram extended his hand, a human gesture of agreement and peace. After a moment's hesitation, Krivax reached out to meet it, his clawed hand passing through the hologram in a symbolic gesture that represented the end of one era and the beginning of another. The day the Ziraxian Empire fell would be remembered not as a military defeat, but as the moment when one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations finally learned the most important lesson of all, that true power lies not in the ability to conquer, but in the wisdom to know when not to.